Morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on your time zone. But I know this is content targeted towards Kenyan students, candidates for that sake. Paper 3, you're going to sit for this paper this year, and so we are going to discuss one of the questions from a silent song. Welcome on board, and if you have not subscribed to the channel, consider subscribing and share my videos. Use them for education. Connect with us during reactions and entertainment. So here we are in silent song, the story ChEQUEMATE, which is the last in Father's a silent song. The question is, developing countries are bedeviled by a myriad of problems which make them stagnate in a vicious cycle of poverty. Discuss the veracity of this statement in relation to ChEQUEMATE. How about that? So I'll repeat this question, and of course I'll be showing on the screen as we discuss this. Developing countries are bedeviled by a myriad of problems which make them stagnate in a vicious cycle of poverty. Discuss the veracity of this statement in relation to the ChEQUEMATE. Now, I understand that many students, when they get to meet these vocabularies, which are not common, talk about vicious cycle, talk about bedevil and myriad, they get confused. Now, I'll advise you students, sometimes if you are short of vocabulary, just go for the keywords. Of course, in this question, you are going to see developing countries, you can see a myriad of problems, and you can see poverty. Focus on those 3 words. Don't repeat them. Use either synonyms or explanations that are simpler and contextualize to the text, and you will have an easy time. So of course you can actually understand that when you talk about problems, there are challenges. When you talk about developing countries, there are upcoming countries which are trying to grow. And we talk about poverty is that misery or challenges that a specific place or people are going through. So of course, let's go right away to the introduction. So introduction, what does introduction give us? So of course an introduction will be as follows. ChEQUEMATE by Kevin Baldesink provides a lens through which we can examine the challenges faced by developing countries such as most of the countries in Africa. It sheds light on the complexity in the interplay of factors that contribute towards the entrapment in the vicious cycle of miseries and despair that many citizens experience. This essay will explore the details that tell the truth in this statement of many challenges that African nations and many other that are growing face. So let's go to the first paragraph. Remember, topic sentence is key. So let's start with that. So the topic sentence starts as the following. The story paints a vivid picture of the economic challenges faced by the characters in Trinidad and Tobago, representative of the struggles encountered in many developing nations within Africa and all over the world. Now let's get to the background information. Sukia, despite her financial success, engages in dubious financial practices, revealing a system where corruption and lack of transparency thrives. Sukia's offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands exemplify where corruption and lack of transparency thrives. She has a prevalence of an opaque financial system that facilitates money laundering and hinder economic development. I think you can check that on page 93. It is clearly depicted how politicians and many other business entrepreneurs fund wealthy companies in exchange for lucrative tenders, highlighting corruption that hampers equitable economic growth. Check that on page 97. It's clear that Sukia is involved in underquoting or undervaluing the value of methanol company, which was actually to be quoted in the right way to enhance the growth of companies and maintenance of employees in Africa. However, what happened that Sukia decided to underquote it, and of course she gets a kickback from Randall, who signs a check as a way to silence her. This is a whole cycle that underscores the growth of many nations in the developing world. Paragraph 2. The narrative, ChEQUEMATE, sheds light on the role of developed countries in perpetuating the challenge faced within these countries. We have unethical business dealings that are conducted in the story by Randall. It's clearly shown how he indicates how they undervalue the methanol plant for personal gain. This depicts a scenario where power entities from developed countries exploit resources and opportunities of developing nations. Randall's sale of the methanol plant to the Chinese government is marked by undervaluation, reflecting the exploitative nature of economic transactions between developed and developing countries. You can check that on page 95. The story clearly hints a broader pattern where developed nations collaborate with corrupt individuals in developing countries to serve the interests of individuals and contribute to the poverty and misery of their own. In the situation of ChEQUEMATE, Randall's action is actually going to siphon the wealth that the company he works for has been putting together, and he clearly testifies that they are going to be, deprived of resources, and workers will have nowhere to work at all. Sukia actually is mesmerized at this, and she ends up asking what will happen to the rest of the workers and investors. Paragraph 3. ChEQUEMATE explores the impact of corruption on governance and public trust, contributing to stagnation of developing countries. A situation that happens in most of the African nations, including Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and many other African countries that are developing. There is a symbiotic relationship between corrupt business figures and politicians, revealing a system where the interests of the elite take precedence over the welfare of the general population. The story suggests that the company's financial contribution to politicians result in immunity against legal consequences, showcasing how corruption undermines the rule of law. You can check that on page 97. The lack of transparency and accountability in government and business dealings portrayed in the story contribute towards a climate where the public interest is left. That what Randall and Sukia do is a corrupt process that they are entrusted with the company they're working for. However, what do? They have personal interests, and therefore they relate with politicians and other people of interest, and they conduct processes that seem to be legal and empower themselves economically at the expense of the rest of the people. So the lack of transparency is a common aspect we've seen in Africa and other developing nations, that they can't account for whatever they receive. Even if they receive donations or help, they cannot actually account for where that money goes. At the end of the day, their nations do not grow. They remain in a cycle of poverty. ChEQUEMATE underscores the role of ignorance in perpetuating the challenges faced in developing nations. The ordinary bank teller, oblivious of Sukia's fraudulent activities, symbolizes a lack of awareness and education, which can impede progress and economic development. We actually see that the bank teller is unable to discern Sukia's illicit actions, emphasizing the role of ignorance in allowing corruption and fraud to persist. Check that on page 93. We actually see that when the bank teller reads that check and realizes we have so much money that has been noted, she begins to advise Sukia on opening a US account, or rather she should contact a manager to, not actually the manager, but the treasurer, to check on the source of money. However, she does not persist, but lets her go by allowing her to either bank or not bank. And this process lets Sukia go scot-free. The lack of financial literacy and awareness among general populace contributes to a cycle where powerful people can exploit the system without fear of scrutiny. Of course, Sukia had a lot of confidence when she was queuing on the line, and she knew very well that the teller, with her low kind of life, the lens, spectacles, and all that, she wouldn't actually question her more. We come to the end of the essay, and so our conclusion is, ChEQUEMATE serves to explain to us how corruption, exploitation, and lack of transparency, alongside illiteracy, among other challenges that grapple the developing nation, create a situation where everybody is entangled in misery. Hence, it is telling us how much we should be aware and create a system full of integrity that will allow the growth of developing nations, failure to which they will suffocate in poverty all along. So bye-bye for now. Actually, there are so many people requesting for essays. It's only a matter of time that we'll have as many as possible coming online. But if you actually read it and you feel it will benefit you, share with others, request for more so that we keep going based on your interest. Otherwise, bye-bye. And I hope that this year you'll actually have a better performance as you go through as many essays that we'll be discussing online as possible. Last year, we actually went through essays and they were set. So just take matters seriously, and with time, you realize that you'll be gaining from whatever we have been sharing here. Thank you, and bye-bye for now.